Welcome to Daryl's Beekeeping Videos. I'm a master beekeeper, and today's topic is about first-year beekeeping skills. Now, if you go by the adage of if you ask 10 beekeepers, you'll get 12 different answers, and all of them will be right. As a basis for this video, I'm going to use the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association's recommended skills for the Certified Beekeeper program in the certified level, which is generally a basic beginner level, entry level skills that you need to acquire. And then I'm going to expound upon that by where to find the information and some skills that they don't really cover during that in their paper. So if you go onto the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association's Master Beekeeping Program page, you'll find some downloadable material that will provide you with study material. It'll talk about the topics that you will want to research, as well as it'll provide some recommended resources such as books and things like that, where you can find the information to go through their Master Beekeeping Program. If you're not part of North Carolina or part of their association, you can still look at their website, or you can look at your own state's Master Beekeeping Program and see what the requirements are for those. And I'm not saying you have to be a member of and go through the Master Beekeeping Program. However, I'm a big proponent of the Master Beekeeping Program because it is a structured learning process to help you through your beekeeping journey from a beginner to all the way to a Master Craftsman, should you choose. And I have other videos on these various topics as we go through in this series. And one of my videos is how to become a Master Beekeeper, where I talk for about an hour on how to go through the program and become a Master Beekeeper or a Master Craftsman. And then I have most of my videos are geared toward the beginner beekeeper, the skills that you'll need to acquire. And again, a lot of my videos don't cover the topics that they actually talk about during the on the Master Beekeeping Program, because I actually talk about how to and show you how to assemble a hive, how to assemble a frame, and all these things that the Master Beekeeping Committee doesn't really talk about. But again, as a general guide for this discussion of this video, I'll use that as a guide, and I'll expound upon those things. So one of the first things you'll look up when you open up their guide is going to tell you, you're going to want to know some history and things like that, hive manipulation. And again, they'll refer you to books and things. So I'm going to tell you basically some good places to find that information. So to learn these skills that we're about to talk about, some good places to start with, as again I stated, was the North Carolina State Beekeepers Association's or Master Beekeeping Program. Again, go in there and look for the references. In addition to that, you want to see their books and then order those books and study them. So for example, some of the books they are going to recommend are Beekeeping for Dummies, again, current edition, if you can get it. Again, because it shows all those basic skills, some pest and disease management type stuff that you're going to find. It's actually a really good book. They also recommend First Lessons in Beekeeping by Dr. Delaplane. They also recommend The Backyard Beekeeper by Kim Flautum. I know I messed up his name, but I apologize for that. But again, he's one of the former editors of the Bee Culture magazine and a very well-respected authority in the beekeeping industry. The Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping book by Dr. Dewey Karen. Again, it's a college-level beekeeping book that a lot of colleges use in their beekeeping courses at the college level. The next book that we're going to recommend is the Hive and Honeybee. On the Master Beekeeping Program's website, on the recommended reading list, they don't recommend this until the master or higher level if you read their differentiation between certified, journeyman, master, and master craftsman level. However, having gone through the Master Beekeeping Program, I can tell you that this is an excellent book to start off with, even as a beginner. It's a little intimidating. It's over 1,000 pages, small font, but it's an excellent book on everything from history to anatomy and physiology to management to equipment. It's basically a one-source document book that you can go through your journey with. Again, this is a very good book to start off with. Then they also recommend the Beekeeper's Handbook by Diana Samataro. Again, I know I butchered her name. I apologize for that. But again, it's another good book because it talks about diseases, honeybee dances, and seasonal beekeeping activities. So again, all these are excellent books to start off with. Some other things you can do besides reading the various books, and there's more books that the Master Beekeeping Program recommends. I just didn't list them all here. But again, these are all ones that I've actually read and are actually really good books. Is look up your local chapter for, and so if you go to your state beekeeping association's master or website and you look up chapters near me, or if you just do a simple Google search, go, beekeeping associations near me, you'll find a local chapter near you, and then go start attending meetings. And I generally recommend that you actually go to several different chapters. For example, I'm in Moore County in North Carolina, but my first year I actually went to nearby counties and went to their chapters as well as time permitted. For example, most chapters will meet on certain days of the week. In other counties, they may meet on different days and times of the week. So I just found my local chapter, found out it was meeting the first Tuesday of every month, and then I went to the second Tuesday of every month, and then a chapter nearby me was meeting the third Tuesday of every month. So I just started going to their meetings, and that increases your learning curve a lot by getting exposed to different chapters and then what information they're putting out. Remember, those meetings are typically only about an hour long, and they're catering from all beekeepers at all levels, from the beginner through the advanced beekeeper. So they'll bring in different topics to talk about. So by going to different chapters, you'll find out different topics every month, and again, increase your experience. Some beekeeping chapters will also offer a chapter's apiary where you can actually go into their own apiary and learn how to manipulate frames, manipulate the bees at the chapter's resources instead of having to wait until you get your own bees. So again, that will speed your learning curve along as you go. If you get a chance, go to these bee schools whenever they're offered. Again, go to your state's levels beekeeping webpage, and they'll typically list when bee schools are being offered throughout your state. And then again, go attend these bee schools, because when you go to the bee school, they're typically anywhere from 1 day to, and it'll have about 8 to 10 hours in the day for that 1 day, and then they may or may not offer an apiary visit and experience that way, or they'll take those 8 hours and they'll spread them out over maybe 2 months and go for about an hour to an hour and a half to each meeting, typically on a weekend. So again, figure out what the bee school is and what works for your schedule, and go attend those things, because you're going to learn all these things I'm about to talk about that you're going to be expected to test on during your certified beekeepers test. Should you choose to go through the Master Beekeeping Program, they're going to teach you all those base skills. They're going to teach you a little bit of history. They're going to teach you management. They're going to teach you equipment. They're going to teach you hive components. When you get to do the apiary visit, if they offer that, they're going to show you how to don the equipment properly. They're going to show you how to light smokers. Again, so attend a bee school if you can. Also, if you go to your local chapter, one of the things that you should ask for when you join that local chapter is ask for a mentor. See if they have a mentorship program, and ask for a mentor. And then once you get a mentor assigned to you, then you can coordinate with that mentor to go to either his or her apiary, or have them come to yours once you get your bees and help you go through your first season or two, and help you work through those problems that you may encounter as you're going through and you're manipulating your hives and your frames, and you're seeing issues such as, for example, if you see deformed wings on your bees, well, that's an indication of a serious varroa mite infestation. It's called deformed wing virus. It's a virus transmitted through the varroa mite that comes on and bites through the exoskeleton of the honeybee. And again, you'll learn all this during the diseases and pests as you go out through either a bee school, or as you go through the Master Beekeeping Program at the advanced levels, and I'll have that in a separate video on diseases and pests, and skills at the next level, what you can obtain. The other thing you can do, you can watch my videos, especially if you're a basic beginner beekeeper. I have a lot of these videos already on how to assemble a frame, how to assemble hive components, how to install foundation, how to light a smoker, how to inspect a hive, which is again going to be one of the tests you have to do if you choose to go through the Master Beekeeping program. You're going to have to be able to inspect a hive at both the certified level and at the master level. So again, I'll walk you through how to properly inspect a hive and what you're looking for. You can also go to colleges and universities. A lot of them offer either in-person or online courses on beekeeping, and then offer some kind of degree in it if you choose to go that route. You can also go to .edu sites, those are again the college and university sites, and see if they have any reading material that's free or YouTube videos. For example, one of my favorite sites to go to refer to people to is the University of Guelph. It's actually in Canada, so for my beekeepers that are watching that are in the northern climates, that's actually a really good site for you because it's more more geared to your climate area, because beekeeping in the south where I'm in North Carolina is very different than beekeeping in the north, even though the management techniques are basically the same: how to manipulate frames, how to make splits, how to do swarm prevention. Those are all basically the same. The difference is when you do it throughout the year. Because based on the temperature, it's very warm here in the south, so we have a longer swarm season, a longer part of the year where it's warm, and we can manipulate the colonies for either reproduction, either doing splits or swarm preventions, again preventing them from swarming, or honey production. Whereas in the north, you might have a very small warm window where you only have a very small window for honey production, or a very long winter where you have to overwinter you have to make more preparations for wintering your bees longer. So again, by joining your local chapters, you'll be able to find out what's best for your area, as well as if you go to the University of Guelph, again, that's in Canada, they'll give you some pointers for what's best for the northern climates. Again, these aren't all inclusive lists, but if you go to North Carolina State University's website, they offer a bee school as well. The bees program, again, it's online teaching. They also have an in-person course as well. If you go onto the University of Florida, you'll see a lot of beekeeper resources there, a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of articles by well-respected doctors in the beekeeping industry. Again, another good university site. Again, there's lots of universities and lots of good sites. I'm not trying to pull shade on any other university, but those are the ones that I know are extremely well published sites. You can also go to trusted beekeeping sites. Again, I'm just going to list a few of them. Obviously, it's not all inclusive, but some of the more reputable ones are Honeybee Health Coalition. Again, each one of these pieces of paper I'm talking about now, I will post as separate slides at the very end of my video so you can actually see what I'm actually reading. So again, Honeybee Health Coalition has a lot of useful information for new beekeepers and experienced beekeepers. The Bee Informed Partnership, or BIP, has a good series of webinars that are pre-recorded, and you can watch those webinars, especially on diseases and pests. They have some really, really good videos on diseases and pests. You can also go to Randy Oliver's website. He's a biologist by trade, but he allows you to use his material as long as you reference his site, which is scientificbeekeeping.com. Again, a very reputable, science-based site. So again, it's a good place to go for learning some basic skills and some basic scientific principles behind some of the things we do. So again, going into the Master Beekeeping Suggested Study for the certified exam, again, you're going to learn this in a bee school should you attend a bee school. For the certified beekeeper test, they're going to want you to know a little bit of basic history. If you're not going through the Master Beekeeping program, you can kind of ignore the history piece. But it is kind of neat to know anyway. So they're going to want you to know obviously because we're a North Carolina State Beekeeper Association, they're going to want you to know when the North Carolina State Beekeeper Association was formed, 1917. And then they're going to want you to know some of the key beekeeping forefathers, such as who Lorenzo Langstroth is, what he's famous for, Beeswax, the first magazine he was pioneered in and published, and also the Langstroth Hive. And again, we talked about the bee space. And he's famous for removing the first removable frame hive that was fully functional in the U.S. Charles Dadant and A.I. Root, who those people are and what they contributed to early beekeeping. They also want to know when the honeybees arrived in the United States. Again, these are all things that you can research through reputable sites and find out. And again, if you go through the bee schools, they're generally going to tell you what those are. And then they're going to want to know what they're going to expect you to know as part of the history, what the major beekeeping regulations are. The most common one you will get asked about on any type of master beekeeping question test, either it's certified journeyman or higher levels, would be the Federal Honeybee Act of 1922 and what that's about. And basically it came into being to protect the United States from a parasite called the tracheal mite that entered the trachea of the honeybee and was causing a lot of problems. And at the certified level or the beginner level, it's all you need to know is what that regulation was, how it came to be, what it's about. And again, the pest that it's talking about, and in this case, it was the tracheal mite. And then they're going to want you to know some history about the major inventions and basically what they are, how they contributed to beekeeping, such as the smoker, the Langstroth hive, imprinted foundation, what its purpose is. Basically, hint is it allows more, it causes the bees to draw out more worker cells as opposed to a mix of worker cells and drone cells, which they're going to do anyway. But the concept is by making cells the size of the worker cells, the concept is the bees will see that and use that as a template and draw out the foundation for it, or the comb. The honey extractor. And then they also want you to know about bee space, which is 3/8 of an inch. Again, discovered by Lorenzo Langstroth. Next thing I want you to know, and then again, as a beekeeper, even if you aren't going through the Master Beekeeping Program, it's good to know what are the various races, or the correct term is either species or stocks of honeybees. So different types of honeybees that you can find in the United States. For example, not only are you going to have to know about the different species or stocks, you need to know what they look like and what their characteristics are. At the certified level or the basic beginning level, so all you need to know is how to identify it and what their characteristics are. When you get to the journeyman or higher level, you will also need to know the scientific names for these types of bees. For example, at the basic level, you're going to need to know the Italian honeybee. At the journeyman level or higher, you're going to need to know the scientific name for it, which would be Apis mellifera ligusta. I know I butchered the name, I'm not a biologist. The next honeybee that you're going to need to know about is the Carniolan, the Caucasian, the German, the Russian, and the Africanized honeybee. Again, at the basic level, it's all you need to know is the tendencies, what they look like, and then some just basic information about them. But again, at the journeyman or higher level, you're going to actually need to know the scientific terminology and things like that. So, for example, some honeybees are good at producing a lot of propolis, and other honeybees are good at producing honey year-round. So again, you have to determine what the bee is, and then what its characteristics are. Some honeybees have strong colonies year-round. Other types of bees reduce their numbers whenever there is a dearth, which is a lack of nectar flow, when the flowers stop producing nectar. Some races or species or stocks of bees, is the proper terms, will actually decrease their numbers while that dearth is going on. And once the nectar flow increases again, they'll rapidly increase their buildup of their numbers. Again, you'll need to know those characteristics. Other bees are very good at varroa mite, getting rid of the varroa mites, such as the Russians or the varroa sensitive hygiene bees, VSH bees. So again, you'll need to know that. And again, as a general beekeeper anyway, you probably should be familiar with those. The most common honeybee that most beginner beekeepers use is the Italian honeybee, simply because it's gentle, has a good honey production, very little propolis, and again, it's a very good bee to start off with. All right, so next thing they're going to talk about, again, next topic, again, it's a good learning skill beginning with, is knowing the various foraging and pollination characteristics of the honeybees. So as a new beekeeper, it's probably a good idea to know what the various anatomy of a flower is. What's the male portion, what's a female portion. So that way, when your bees are out foraging, or when you're getting ready to plant a garden for your honeybees, it's good to know what types of plants they're interested in, because some plants are better suited for other types of bees, such as, or other types of pollinators, so such as bumblebees, carpenter bees, moths, or these other types of pollinators. And if you want plants that are specifically made for your honeybees, you're going to want to select certain types of plants. So again, this is where it's good to know what types of plants are geared best for honeybees instead of butterflies or wax or honeybees or moths or butterflies. Again, and there are plenty of books out there on that, on the various topics. The next thing you're going to need to know about in the foraging and pollination category are the three types of beekeepers. So what type of beekeeper do you want to be? Again, I have a video on how to become a beekeeper and what it means to be a beginner beekeeper, where I talk a little bit about this. But three types of beekeepers they're looking for, the answer for that is a hobbyist beekeeper. Basically, you have a few hives and you're just interested in helping the honeybee and maybe getting some honey. It's very, very minor. Next level up is a sideliner beekeeper, which has another job outside of beekeeping as their main source of income, but they also augment their income through beekeeping, such as bee sales or honey sales or selling equipment. Typically, a sideliner may have anywhere between 50 and 300 hives. And then the third category is a commercial beekeeper, which means that they are earning the vast majority of their income is from the beekeeping revenue stream, such as selling nucleus colonies, packaged bees, honey, whatever that is a commercial beekeeper. So again, three categories are hobbyist, sideliner, and commercial beekeeper. The next thing you're going to need to know, even at the basic level, is some anatomy and physiology. At the beginner beekeeper level, it's all we're expecting you to know are some basic scientific terms and the common terms. For example, you'll need to know the two different sexes of the honeybees and whether they are haploid or diploid. Again, you'll learn these in a bee school, should you attend a bee school, or if you go through the Master Beekeeping Program and you read any of the manuals they recommend, they will talk about, even in the Beekeeping for Dummies, they talk about haploid and diploid. So basically, haploid means it has one set of chromosomes. Diploid means it has two sets of chromosomes. A haploid is in a drone, which is a male honeybee, and the diploid, again, two sets of chromosomes. It is in a worker or a queen. Again, so you need to be familiarized with those terms. Then you need to know the two different castes of honeybees. So a caste is a differentiation within a sex of the honeybees. For example, there are two castes in the honeybees. That is a queen and a worker. They are both female, but they have very different functionalities in the hive. The queen is obviously made for to lay eggs and for reproduction, and she also releases a bunch of pheromones, whereas a worker can only lay unfertilized eggs. She cannot get mated, and her main job is to take care of the brood and also to do, as her name implies, to do all the work. They do all the foraging, they do all the maintenance in the hive, they build the comb, etc., etc. So again, you need to know the two castes, which again, the queen and the worker. The next thing you'll need to know, again, whether you go through the Master Beekeeping program or not, you'll still need to know this, the 4 stages of a honeybee's life cycle. So it's an egg, and then it's a larvae, then it's a pupa, and then it emerges as an adult. At the basic level, it's all you need to know is the different stages. It helps if you know the different timelines within each one. When you get to the journeyman and higher beekeeper levels, you have to know how to calculate each one of those. And again, I talked a little bit about it during the Master Beekeeping video, and then I'll talk about it in some of the later videos in this series on what next steps are in your beekeeping journey. All right, so brood. As a new beekeeper, you need to know what right looks like in a hive. So when you pull that frame out and you see a frame of brood, you need to know what a good, healthy frame of brood pattern looks like and what is a bad brood pattern, what we call a shotgun pattern brood, which indicates diseases and pests. So again, I'll try to remember to put some still videos in this video to show you a sampling of some of that stuff you ought to look at. But again, at the beginning level, you need to still know what a good pattern looks like. If you watch my how to inspect a hive video, it's an hour-long video. An actual inspection only takes about 5 to 10 minutes, but that video is an hour long because I show you pictures as well as telling you, as I'm going through and inspecting hive, I'm telling you what I'm looking for, and I'm showing you pictures of what some of these things are. Again, what a good brood pattern looks like, what a varroa mite looks like, what a deformed wing virus looks like on a worker honeybee. All right, so again, we talked about brood. You also need to know what a healthy larvae looks like. Larva is singular, larvae with the AE as part of the name is plural for larva. So again, a healthy larva is a pearly white larvae. If you see a larva that is yellow to brown and has visible white lines, those are their trachea, that's an indication of a disease. So in this case, it's European foul brood more than likely. Again, at the basic level, it's all you have to do is recognize that there's a problem, what the problem is, and then call either your state inspector or call an experienced beekeeper over and say, hey, what's going on, and help you walk through the problem. But at the beginning level, just know what wrong looks like and what right looks like. And if you see something wrong, know who to call. You'll need to know where to find the brood. So which chamber is typically the brood is found in. And you'll need to be able to identify different types of cells by looking at it. When you see the capped cells, you'll need to identify which is a worker cell based on size and by its shape. It'll be flat, as opposed to a drone cell, which is a male, and it's wider and it's taller, typically has a tip that sticks up like a bullet tip above the rest of the cells. So again, you'll need to know that. You also need to know the difference between why brood cells are yellow versus the cappings versus the cappings on honey, which is white or dark. We call that wet cappings. So again, you'll need to know what causes that. Basically, for honey, they're using fresh beeswax off the wax glands of a worker. In a brood cell, they're using either the fresh wax or they'll use some wax that's previously used somewhere else, and they'll use it, and they'll also mix in a little bit of propolis with that to help keep the cells sterilized. Again, as part of the brood, you also have to identify the different types of bees within the colony. Remember, the hive is where they live, the colony are the actual bees themselves. So you'll need to know by sight what a drone looks like. You'll need to know that it has, it's a bigger body, and it has his eyes actually his compound eyes actually touch at the top of his head, and his 3 ocelli are in front of it, versus a queen, which has a longer abdomen. Her wings don't cover her abdomen, and you will also have to know how to identify a worker from a drone or a queen. Again, at any skill level, basic or advanced, you need to know how to identify the different types of bees. You'll need to know what the bees eat. If it's a queen larvae, what's it being fed? The answer is royal jelly produced by the hypopharyngeal glands of the workers. At the basic level, you don't need to know that it's the hypopharyngeal glands. You just need to know that it's royal jelly that's being fed to them being fed to the queen. For the workers and drones, it's royal jelly for the first 3 days, and then it changes to nectar and pollen or honey and pollen mixture, and that's what helps determine the sex, whether it's going to be a queen or a worker, or caste, technically, the term is. Then you need to know, at the basic level, you'll need to know the basic anatomy, such as the 3 segments of a honeybee, the major sections: the head, the thorax where the wings and the legs attach. You'll need to know that there are 4 wings. You need to know that there are 6 legs. And then in the abdomen, which is where the most of the organs are found, you have the brain, it's in the head. Again, the thorax holds the locomotor section, which is the wings and the legs. And then you'll need to know the antenna. You'll need to know how the bee uses various senses. For even at the basic level, beekeeper level, you'll need to know these skills and how to identify basic anatomy. For example, they smell with their antenna. They use their antenna to determine the cell thickness of the walls, of the comb walls. You'll need to know how bees hear. For example, they use the Johnston's organ, which is in the antenna, and they will also use the subgenual organ. I know I butchered that name. In the, for lack of better terms, their knees, in their legs, at one of the joints, the subgenual organ. But again, they mostly use their Johnston's organ to hear. Again, you'll need to know how they smell. Again, the antenna. You'll need to know about the different eyes. For example, you'll need to know that there are 2 compound eyes and then 3 single lens ocelli and what those are used for. For example, the ocelli are used for light intensity, and the large compound eyes, they're used to see a mosaic pattern. And then you'll have to know that the number of hexes, or the little omatidia, I know I butchered that name too, the individual cells on the eyes, the number of those cells varies from a queen to a worker to a drone. Again, as you get through the master beekeeping levels at the journeyman or higher, you'll need to know the approximate number of those hexagons that are in each compound eye. But at the basic level, it's all you need to know is that compound eyes are used have a mosaic vision, and are used for colors and landmarks. And the ocelli are used for light intensity, determine light intensity. You also need to know at the higher levels how bees navigate, be it by landmarks and by using polarized light. But again, at basic level, so all you have to know is basically the concept of the eyes. Talked about that. And then as part of the anatomy and physiology, at the basic level, you're going to need to know about the honeybee, especially the worker honeybee, because she has 2 pollen baskets on her rear legs, and those are called corbicula. You'll need to know that scientific term at the basic level for your test. At the certified beekeeper level test, should you go through the master beekeeping program. But again, you need to know that only the worker has the pollen basket, or the corbicula, as they're called. Neither the queen nor the drone have a corbicula. All right. The next thing you'll need to know at the basic level as part of anatomy and physiology is how long the bees live. There are differences in ages between the queen. The queen typically lives up to 5 years. You'll need to know the difference between drones and workers. What happens to the drones during the winter? Answer is they get killed off. The workers chase them out of the hive, they die, and the queen will lay unfertilized eggs whenever she determines she needs drones around. And then again, you need to know the difference between, at the certified level, the basic beginner level, you need to know the length that a summer bee lives versus a winter bee. Answer is about 45 days for a summer bee, and then up to 6 months for a winter bee. When you get to the higher levels, the journeyman or higher, you'll need to know the mechanism that causes those worker bees to live longer. The answer is a I think it's called an enzyme, but it's called vitellogenin is the enzyme that causes them to live longer. Again, there's a ample study material. Randy Oliver has some information about the vitellogenin, and there's other websites that talk about the vitellogenin that helps the honeybees live longer throughout the winter months. And when that generally comes into being, generally the fall months, is when they start producing more levels of vitellogenin. Again, at the basic level, you just have to know that they live longer. At the higher levels, you need to know the cause of that, which is the vitellogenin. Okay, then you need to know the different functions of each bee. So what's the queen's function in the colony? What's the workers do? What do the drones do? You know, basically their sole purpose is to mate, not their own queen, but another queen, and they fly to drone congregation areas. Again, at basic level, it's good to know that concept that they're not inbreeding inside the colony, their own colony. They're actually flying out to drone congregation areas where a virgin queen will fly through and get mated by up to 20 different drones, typically anywhere between 7 and 20 drones. And again, at the basic levels, all you know is what's happening. At the journeyman or higher level, you need to know those concepts. All right, next thing you need to know at the basic level are the glands, some basic glands and pheromones. You need to know that basically the queen is regulating what goes in as part of the regulation of what goes on inside a colony. She's releasing pheromones. Again, at the basic level, you don't need to know what those pheromones are other than queen pheromones. At the higher levels, you'll need to know those types of pheromones, whether it's primer pheromones or releaser pheromones, and then the various types of pheromones that they're talking about. Queen mandibular glands, on all those glands that are producing the various pheromones, you need to know what those are and the scientific terms for those. You also need to know that even at the basic level, you'll need to know that the brood are actually producing pheromones themselves. That's what helps suppress the workers' ovaries and helps keep them from laying eggs, as well as the queen pheromones. But at basic level, know that if you have brood, capped brood, and uncapped brood, that those are releasing pheromones, and that will help keep you from getting a laying worker. Doesn't fully do it, but again, it helps suppress those. In conjunction with queen pheromones, it will help keep you from getting a laying worker. You'll also need to know that a worker has the only one that produces wax, and she has 4 wax glands in 2 pairs. So 4 pairs of glands would be 8 glands, where she produces wax pellets. You'll need to know what the Nasonov gland is. Basically, it's a worker. Again, and where that is. And again, if I remember to put the photo in it, I've got a photo of a worker fanning her Nasonov gland, and what that is. Basically, she's releasing pheromones saying, hey, we're over here, our colony's over here, and it helps orient the bees back to their colony. And then you'll need to know, even at the basic level, the different alarm pheromones. For the basic level, it's all you need to know is basically a sting. When you get stung, that worker is releasing alarm pheromones. At the basic level, you can also know that when a honeybee bites another bee, she's also releasing pheromones through her mandibular glands. But the main gland that you need to know about in pheromone for the alarm pheromone at the basic level is the sting pheromone, that she's releasing the sting, and that's what causes other bees to come and attack you because they are defending their colony. They're saying, hey, here's a threat here, go over here. At the higher levels, you'll need to know what those chemical component parts are for each of those pheromones and where they're produced. For example, 2-heptanone or all the other various compounds are in either the mandibular gland or the sting. All right, so the next one is at the basic level, you'll need to have some basic concepts of a dance, of the honeybee dances. So when you pull up your frame and you see a bee spinning, that's called a round dance. Or if you see her move around and then do a zigzag pattern and then walk back around and do a zigzag pattern, that is called a waggle dance. At the basic level, you need to know how to recognize that, what the dance is, and approximately what the distance is when she's signaling that. For example, if it's a round dance, it's typically less than 100 meters, if I remember correctly. And if it's a waggle dance, it's typically a forage source pollen nectar, propolis, water, whatever she's trying to convey to her fellow colony members is, hey, that source is in this direction and this direction and this distance. At the basic levels, all you have to know is what the dance is and approximately how far that it's up to. At the higher levels, you'll actually need to know, you'll actually have to calculate the direction that that dance is conveying. Again, I talked about that during the Master Beekeeping video that I did yesterday. Next thing that we're going to talk about is some bee activity, as they have in the certified guide. So you need to know, even at the basic level, how far bees typically forage for various sources, such as a honeybee a worker will typically forage up to 5 miles away for nectar. She'll typically go about 300 feet or so for water, but she can go further if she needs to. But again, the general rule of thumb is they will forage for up to 5 miles. You'll need to know that at the basic level. You also need to know what all they forage for and what they store inside the colony or inside the hive. So they forage for nectar, they forage for water, they forage for resins, which they come back and they mix it with wax and they form propolis. You need to know that they forage for water, but they do not store water in the hive. They obtain water inside the hive through condensation. That's a basic certified beekeeper test question you'll need to know. Again, they don't store water in it, but again, in the cells, but they do obtain water from the moisture in the hive, or they actually go out and forage for it. You obviously know that they convert the nectar to honey. You'll need to know that process and some of the basic enzymes that's involved in that. When the honeybee takes in the nectar, she takes it into her honey stomach or her crop, and then you'll need to know those basic level enzymes that she's going to add, invertase and the other enzymes that she's going to add to that to help convert it to honey. All right, bee nutrition. All right, so you need to know the difference between pollen and carbohydrates, such as sugar or nectar. Again, pollen is providing protein. Carbohydrates are obviously from your nectar and things like that. Next thing you'll need to know for bee activity is you need to know what the various queen cells look like. You'll need to know where the swarm cells are and what a supersedure cell is and where to find it. Again, if you watch my How to Inspect a Hive video, I talk about that. A supersedure cell is located on a certain spot of the frame, and it requires different management techniques for if you see a supersedure cell, vice if you see a swarm cell on the bottom half of a frame or in the margins or on the bottom, what's going on in the hive and what you do. For example, a supersedure cell, you're probably not going to do anything about it, or you may limit it to a couple of queen cells. On a swarm cells, you need to know what's causing that. That is caused by congestion inside the brood chamber, and you'll need to know how to either A, prevent it, or B, what you can do once you see the swarm cells, how to handle that. At the basic level, just understand what you're seeing and understand some of the basic concepts, such as making a split perhaps. In one of my later videos I'm going to talk about some advanced skills. We're going to talk about the various types of splits and some of the other things you're going to be hopefully want to learn in your second or third year of beekeeping. The next thing you need to know at the basic level, what a laying worker looks like. Again, I have a photo of what that looks like in the How to Inspect the Hive. But again, it's multiple eggs within a cell. Sometimes if you see 2 eggs in a cell, that's normal if you have a young queen. But if you have multiple eggs in multiple cells, you may very well have a laying a laying worker on your hands. And then there's various management techniques to handle that. Next thing you need to know is what are the various temperatures that the bees operate in. For example, you need to know what temperature the bees form a cluster inside the colony or inside the hive. Remember, the hive is where they live, the colony are the bees. So generally it's 57 degrees, the bees will form a ball, and we call that a cluster. You'll need to know that. You'll need to know at what temperatures the bees will generally go out and forage. They'll generally come out and do cleansing flights where they go to the bathroom at about 46 degrees or so, and then you can see them a little bit lower than that, but that's the general, what I've seen mine at 46 degrees, and that's generally what most beekeepers see them flying at to do cleansing flights. They can fly out for shorter periods under cooler temperatures, but they generally return to the hive faster to get warm. You also need to know what that cluster, not only the temperature, but what it looks like, and realize that if they form a cluster, that it actually can go up into up into a second layer hive body. So if you're running double deeps, 2 deep hive bodies, realize that that cluster, when it gets 57 degrees, may actually go up into the second box. That's why we don't open the box if it's under a certain temperature. We'll generally lift up the box from the bottom, see if we see swarm cells, but we generally don't pull out frames because they're forming a cluster at 57 degrees. As a general rule of thumb, I don't inspect a colony and pull out frames unless it's 64 degrees or higher to prevent hypothermia, and also to rule out chances of them being in that cluster and damaging my bees or my queen. You'll need to know at the basic level what the bees maintain the temperature inside the hive are. When the bees heat inside a hive, they're not actually heating the box space itself. They're actually heating the brood cluster itself, the brood and the cluster of bees. You'll need to know what that temperature is. Generally, it's about 93 to 95 degrees, 93 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, you'll need to know that for your tests should you take a certified test or higher. You'll need to know at the basic level how many pounds of honey it takes a worker to make 1 pound of wax. Book answer is 6 to 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of beeswax. You'll need to, at the basic level, beekeeper, you'll need to know a general concept of how to make a split. Again, so all you do is basically split it equally, and then so you have at least 4 frames of bees ideally. Again, have a general concept of splits because that's one of your management techniques. When you get to the next levels, then you might want to know the different ways to make splits, equal split, on the spot queen rearing, all these types of things on how to raise queens. All right. You'll need to know what bee space is. Remember we talked about during the history portion, I talked about Lorenzo Langstroth discovering that bee space is actually 3/8 in space. And what happens if you have too much of a space or too little space? If you have spaces more than 3/8 of an inch space, they're either A, going to fill that space with propolis or comb, beeswax, or they'll make burr comb or bracing comb, depending on the space. Again, you'll need to know what at the basic level, you'll need to know what those terms are. The next thing you need to know, the concept you'll need to know at the basic beekeeper level, is you need to know what the space sensitivity of a honeybee is. For example, when a honeybee returns from foraging, what distance can she determine where her hive is without the aid of landmarks or a fellow worker fanning her Nasonov? The answer to that is bees are space sensitive to about 4 feet, which means if I need to move my colony, the general rule of thumb is I move that colony 2 feet each day until I get to realizing that a bee's space sensitive is about 4 feet. So I can move it up to 4 feet, but generally I'll only move about 2 feet until I get that colony or the hive where I want it to be. So again, have that concept, and that'll help you manipulate. So one of the worst things you can do as a new beekeeper is to pick up a hive and move it to a different location in a hive. So what in your apiary. So what happens is the bees come back and they'll go back. You've moved the box that the bees were in. You may have moved it 6 to 10 feet away, and the bees will come back to that space where that colony or that box used to be. Excuse me, the hive, and they're flying around in a ball in the air, going, "My home was here. What am I doing? Where's my home?" So the workers that you've moved, well, then you'll see them raising up their abdomen and releasing pheromones through their Nasonov gland. So if you realize that bees are space sensitive to about 4 feet, and knowing that if you want to move a hive, you got to move it 2 feet at a time or so. Or the other technique is you move it more than 5 miles away, leave it overnight or 2 or 3 days, as much as you want. and then you move it back, and then you can put it anywhere you want inside your apiary. Again, you have to understand that concept as a basic beekeeper. All right, next thing you need to know as a basic beekeeper are the various hive equipment and the various tools. So understand at the basic level, there are different types of hives that you can that you can use. You can use a Langstroth hive, you can use a Warray hive, you can use any of the horizontal hives, such as a top bar hive or a long Langstroth hive. We would generally recommend for new beekeepers using the Langstroth hive, and the reason for that is because the parts and components are easy to obtain. But if you go to one of the others, a top bar hive or something like that, or a Warray hive, it's generally a little harder to get replacement parts for it. They aren't readily available local. All right. You'll need to know, especially if you're going through the Master Beekeeping program, as part of the certified test, you'll need to be able to describe the various hive components and what they're used for. A hive stand, a bottom board, whether it's a solid bottom board or a screen bottom board, a hive body, a brood chamber, a honey super, the various frame sizes, or a drone frame versus a worker's frame. Again, you'll need to know all those types. You'll need to know what a telescoping top is, what is an inner cover is used for, if you use it at all. And then you'll need to know the various beekeeping tools, such as a smoker, a hive tool, frame grips, queen excluders. These are all skills and concepts that you need to be familiar with at the basic beekeeper level, as well as all the other levels. You'll need to know what protective equipment that you might need at the basic beekeeper, whether at the basic beekeeper level, whether that be just a simple veil to protect your eyes from bees from stinging your eyes, or a ventilated suit or a cloth suit. You'll need to know whether it's ventilated or just cloth suit. You also need to know the gloves and all those protective gear that you need to know. You'll need to know why on the suits, why they are certain colors. For example, you'll never see beekeeping suits that are black or brown, because those are things that are threats to the honeybees, and they perceive that as a threat and they'll come at you. So, for example, if I were to wear any dark clothing, I can generally expect the guard bees to come out and visit me. Occasionally, I will forget to take off my sunglasses when I go out in the apiary, and I will have, inevitably, if I get in visual range of those guard bees, they'll come out and say hello to my veil because they're trying to get to my sunglasses. You'll need to know that as a basic beekeeper. You also need to know what smells trigger honeybee defensive activities. For example, if you eat bananas, that closely resembles the smell of the honeybee alarm pheromones when they sting something. So again, you can expect the guard bees to come out and pay you a visit should you eat bananas and go out into the apiary. If you wear cologne or perfume and go out into the apiary, you can expect the bees to come and pay a visit to your veil because they find that offensive. So again, at basic beekeeper level, you need to know these things. Talked about that. All right, next thing you need to know, at the basic level, you need to know the pros and cons of how to obtaining bees. Are you going to get a package bees, or are you going to get a nucleus colony or a nuke? So you need to, I'm going to check my battery, just make sure. Sorry, making sure that I saw a flashing light and making sure my battery wasn't going low and I wasn't about to end my video. All right, so again, you need to know the difference between installing package bees, and you'll need to know that process even at the basic level. You'll need to know the pros and cons to a package bees. It's cheaper for pros, and there's some other things. And the cons, basically they could reject that queen that's in that package with them. And the pros and cons for a nucleus colony. Again, at the basic level for the certified exam, certified test, you're going to need to be able to explain, should it be on the test, you're going to need to explain that process of how to install a package bee, especially during your practical exam, should the beekeeper examiner ask you that type of question. You're going to need to know what the requirements to sell honeybees in your state are. If you go to the North Carolina State website, again, I'll have this in my final product at the very end, I'll have these as slides, and it actually lists the sites, the site. You'll need to know that what the requirements are. Do you have to have a permit to sell honeybees? In North Carolina, if you are selling 10 or more colonies, you have to have a permit. If you are selling 9 or less, you do not. Or if you are having a one-time sell, going out of business sell, then you do not need a permit. Again, you need to know those regulations, and you need to know where to find that. You need to know where to find authorized dealers in North Carolina too. Again, you can go to Billy Bob's Beekeeping and buy his, that's okay. But if you want to find a reputable, registered, somebody that's sold bees, has a permit to sell bees, is somebody that's been inspected by their state inspector, there is a spot to go to on the North Carolina's Department of Agricultural site. Again, I'll have that link in that final slide that I'm going to show you. You'll need to know it as a basic beekeeper level, and if you're going through the Master Beekeeping program, you need to be able to point people to that website to where to go to. You also need to know what the purpose of state beekeeping inspectors are, and what their purpose is. Here's a hint. They're here to help you. In North Carolina, they are a free resource. They're part of your taxes that you're paying when you're paying taxes. That pays for their services. I've had my state aid inspector out to me and help me figure out things that I can't figure out what's going on. Probably about 3 or 4 times over the years I've been doing beekeeping. Again, they are here to help you determine what the cause of bee loss is, or if you're not sure if you're seeing a disease or a pest, what the cause of that. They'll actually come out for free and help you determine what that cause is. Again, you need to be able to know where to go on their website to figure out which inspector is responsible for your area and how to contact them. You need to know at the basic beekeeper level, you need to know how and where to place a hive. You'll need to know the terrain, whether it's going to be flat terrain, slope terrain, whatever it is, near a water source, whether it's going to be a shaded area, sunny area. You need to know which direction the hive opening is supposed to face, generally south or to the east. You'll need to know what the distance between the front of the hive and the nearest obstacle in front of it is. You'll need to know the minimum distance between the rows, 10 feet, the answer to that. So if you're running, like in my apiary, I run multiple rows, they're at least 10 feet apart, because the honeybee is going to fly out about 6 feet and then she's going to spiral up. So we generally, the book answer is 10 feet between rows, so it gives her enough space to come out and then clear any obstacles and go up to her flying altitude where she's going to forage or wherever she's going to do. All right, you also need to know what the laws are and local regulations are for having colonies in your area. For example, some cities and townships have ordinances governing the number of colonies that you are allowed to have in your backyard. For example, Whispering Pines, where I live, limits their hive to no more than 5 colonies, which is the state's regulation says you can have a minimum of 5, and the ordinances can't go below that unless it is a housing association or a private property. Then those don't apply. Housing associations get away with their own set of regulations. But again, cities and towns can limit that. They can also limit you to, if you certified beekeeping training. For example, Whispering Pines requires you to have no more than 5 colonies. They also require you, before you put the first colony in there, they require you to be a certified beekeeper. So again, you have to know those local laws and ordinances for your area. The next thing you talk about is your hive manipulation. Again, part of the certified test and also part of the basic skills, you'll need to know how to don protective equipment. You will also need to know how to light a smoker. I have a video on how to light a smoker and keep it lit during your inspections. You'll need to know how to use the various hive tools, such as hive tools, frame grips, things like that. I have a video on how to use hive tools, either J-hook or the traditional L-shaped hive tool. again, look for that video. It'll show you the pros and cons to each type of hive tool. You'll need to know for hive manipulation, you'll need to know what defensive defensive bee behavior is and what are the likely causes for that. So do you have a bad genetics, or is it something simple as pest or disease, which is the most common, or are you in a dearth, which is a lack of nectar flow, and the bees are being defensive because there's no food around, so they're defending their colonies, their food sources, from robbing or any of these other types of threats. The next thing you need to know is how to manipulate the frames throughout the various seasons. So when you're doing an inspection, you're going to need to know which frames to remove first and why you want to do that. Again, if you watch my how to inspect a hive video, I talk about that. How to remove which frame first. It's the outside frame, the answer to that. And then why you want to do that. The next thing you want to know is frame manipulation, because during certain times of the year, we'll actually rotate the brood chambers. For example, as the bees move up, the bees naturally want to move up to get their resources. So the honey is typically stored above, and then the brood chambers below. Well, as they consume those resources, they're going to go laterally to the frames left and right of them, and they are going to go up into the next brood chamber or food storage area, if it's a honey super, if you leave your honey supers on, and they're going to move up. Well, in the spring, we rotate, because the bees have gone up through the winter, they move to that upper box. In the spring, we're going to take that brood, the frames that contain the brood, and move them to the lower box, and all the empty frames and the frames that contain pollen and honey, we're generally going to put those in the top and leave one or two in the bottom, and we'll tell you where to put those, generally on the outside. Except for during the spring, when she's building up, you want a frame of pollen and honey next to her so you can easily get to it. The workers can easily get to it. And in the fall, we'll reverse that. Again, so you want to make sure that the brood is down and then the honey is on the top. So we reverse it during the spring. We also reverse it during the fall to counter what the bees are doing naturally. All right, the next thing you need to know at the basic level is about stinging. So if you get stung, you need to know what to do. So you want to scrape the sting away by trying to pinch it with your fingers, because you're actually, when the honeybee stings you, she leaves the stinger in you, and the next thing you're going to know is what happens to the honeybee when she stings you. She dies. She flies away. She leaves part of her abdomen. She leaves that sting gland, the poison sac there, and it's constantly pumping poison into you until it's emptied. So you need to know to scrape it away with a straight edge instead of trying to pinch it, because then you're squeezing more poison into it. You also need to know at the basic level when is a swelling normal and when is a sting life-threatening, such as breathing issues or things like that. So at the basic level, you need to know what's natural and not life-threatening, and what is a life-threatening condition where you have to go to see medical attention. Talked about that. Seasonal management, we talked a little bit about that already. If your state has a beekeeping calendar, know what that is and know where to get it. For example, if you were to, in North Carolina, the most popular one was produced by one of our state inspectors, Nancy Rupert, excellent state inspector. She actually created a month-by-month calendar, a Word document, and she saved it as a PDF file, where you can actually go in and see month by month by month what you are recommended to do to your colonies, and things that you should be doing by each month. So if your state has something like that, again, what happens in the northern states, such as Minnesota or Michigan, is very different than what happens here in North Carolina in the south, because the temperatures are different. The management techniques are the same, but when you do those techniques are different based on what the heat is in your area, how cold or how warm it is. So again, look for that. In North Carolina, you can look up Nancy Rupert's beekeeping calendar, and it's readily available on a lot of beekeeping websites, chapters websites. They have that readily available for you. If you go to my other beekeeping forum on Facebook, Beekeepers United group, I've got a copy of that. Nancy said I could post it there and distribute it. So if you go to my Beekeepers United group, Facebook group, if you look in my files section, it's in there for you as well. Again, we talked about seasonal activities. Swarm prevention, you need to know about swarm prevention, springtime and potentially early fall. Feeding, you need to know when to feed liquid to your honeybees, syrup, either a 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 sugar to water mixture ratio. You'll need to know when to feed them dry feed, such as candy boards. You'll need to know when to apply, give them dry pollen or pollen patties and pros and cons to each. Pollen patties are great for them, but you have to realize that small hive beetles also love pollen patties and they're a huge pest to the honeybees. You need to know about frame rotation. We talked about that earlier. And then you need to know about the various preparations that you need for each season: spring, summer, fall, winter. So again, and when you want to do that, when you want to, do you want to put a simple windbreak around your hives for the fall and winter, or do you need, in the case of my northern friends, do you actually need to wrap your hives with some kind of insulation all the way around them to help the bees maintain warmth in there? Remember, they are heating the cluster, but if you maintain the hive warm, you're going to get some of that residual heat going inside the hive, and they don't have to form as tight of a ball in their cluster. And again, at the basic level, you need to know about some diseases and pests and how to prevent them and what they look like. At the basic level, you just need to know what they look like and how to mitigate it. For example, you need to know about external pests such as ants, skunks, bears, mice. Different types of birds, such as blue jays, are notorious for grabbing honeybees. They don't grab enough to do any damage. It sucks if you're that one honeybee, but they don't do any real damage. But realize they'll come in and eat your honeybees as they fly through the air. They'll scoop up a honeybee and eat it. They may scoop up your queen, virgin queen, as she's out on her mating flight. You also need to know about the various wasps and hornets. You need to know about internal pests, such as varroa mites, wax moths, and small hive beetles, and ways that you can mitigate their damage and how to manage them a little bit. Again, at the basic beekeeping level. At the higher levels, journeyman or master, you need to know the scientific names for those. You also need to know the treatments for those as well. You'll need to know the diseases. At the basic level, you just need to know what wrong looks like. If there's diarrhea, that's caused by nosema, caused by a microsporidium. Whenever you get to the journeyman or higher, you'll need to know the cause of it, the scientific name of the disease or the pest, and then what the treatments are. For example, for disease, for diarrhea, you basically don't do anything for it. You just let it run its course. Old school, they used to say use Fumagillin B. They've since determined that the different classes of nosema, there's Nosema apis and Nosema cerana, and what they found was Fumagillin B, which is the antibiotics that's used to treat that, can actually make the Nosema cerana version worse. So the general practice now is just let it run its course and provide them fresh water. So again, you need to know those various management techniques. At the basic level, just know that, okay, I got diarrhea. This is normal poop on the outside of a hive where she just didn't make, the worker didn't make it all the way out. She pooped on her way out. Not a big deal. But if you see a lot of poop, you need to know that that's potentially nosema, and then call either your state inspector or a higher level beekeeper to come and help you figure out what to do about that. You will need to know what some of the major diseases look like. Again, if you watch my How to Inspect a Hive, I talk about those diseases and what some of the indicators for it. For example, you'll need to know, even at the basic level, you'll need to know what European foul brood looks like and smells like. You may not need to know the scientific terms and what the cause is or the treatments for it, but you'll need to know what it looks like and when to seek external help. You'll need to know what American foul brood looks like. You'll need to know what chalk brood looks like. You'll need to know what sac brood looks like. Again, at the basic level, just realize something's wrong and call somebody that has a higher level of beekeeping experience to come and help you. All right, then you'll need to know at the basic level, you'll need to know what indications are starving. If you have bees that have starved to death, you'll need to know how to diagnose that. You also need to know if you have pesticide poisoning. So when the honeybees go out and forage, they're going foraging for flowers and weeds and the flowers on the weeds and plants and crops. Well, if you live in an area that has a lot of farmers and they're using, and they don't realize you're in the area or they don't care that you've got honeybees in the area, you've got to realize what pesticide poisoning looks like. So they'll go back and they'll forage and they'll get the pollen or the nectar and they'll bring that back into the hive and they'll either make honey or they'll store the pollen. You may not find out about pesticide poisoning till they consume that nectar or or consume that pollen that poison is in. If you encounter that, you need to know what that looks like, and then you need to know to contact your state apiary inspector, because there are rules and regulations. If you have a registered hive, the pesticide users in the area are supposed to notify you that they are about to spray pesticides that can be harmful to your honeybees, and then from there you have to take your own remedies, what you want to do, whether you want to cover up your hive with a wet sheet or actually move your colonies. But depending on your state, what those rules and regulations are. But North Carolina, if you have a registered hive, they're supposed to notify you within a certain radius if they are using pesticides that are harmful to honeybees. And again, if you have pesticide poison evidence, you can contact your state inspector and she can help you determine the cause of that and then hopefully take some kind of legal action against that. You also need to know what chilled brood looks like. Remember, you can cause bees to die from chilling death. They call it chilled brood. Hypothermia. All right, so basically that's all the material that's in the Certified Beekeepers Study Guide. So I'll briefly talk about some other things that aren't in that. Again, I have a lot of this in my videos, in my various videos. So, and some of these I'll touch on that are already there. And this video is almost done, I promise. I know it's long. So the first thing is again, as a basic skill level, you need to know where to place a hive. Again, whether it's the physical location, whether you're going to use a hive stand or not, whether it should be in the full sun or shade. You need to know how to install the package bees, should you choose to do that method or not. You should be familiar with it. If you're going nucleus colony, which is what I recommend that you do, because it's more secure and more guaranteed as opposed to a package bees. You need to know how to move the bees, the hives, within the apiary. We talked about it earlier, moving them 2 feet at a time, realizing bees have a space sensitive up to about 4 feet, so you can move them up to 2 feet at a time. 2 feet at a time is the book answer until you eventually get them where you want to do, or you move them 5 miles away, let them stay for 24 to 48 hours or longer, and then move them back and put them anywhere you want inside your apiary. You need to know how to put on the beekeeping safety equipment. At a bare minimum, you want to use a veil at all times you're inside the apiary. If you get stung in your eyes, you've got serious medical problems. If they sting you anywhere else, it's not as bad. But if you get stung in your eye, you've got serious medical problems right off the bat. So at a bare minimum, I wear a veil anytime I go inside my hive and I lift it up. And especially if I'm manipulating frames, I'm definitely wearing a veil. If I'm just going out there and it's cold and I know the bees aren't flying, again, I'll just generally wear a veil as a safe precaution. If I'm actually pulling out frames, then I'll actually wear either the bee jacket or a full bee suit and gloves. You also need to know how to light a smoker and how to keep it lit. And then you'll need to know what you can use for smoker fuel. Again, my video on how to light a smoker talks about that. What you cannot use or should not use is anything that's petroleum based. Do not use gasoline, do not use oil, do not use kerosene as smoker fuel. Again, because it contaminates the honey and the wax and all those other things. But you can use things like pellets or wood products, or pine straw is the cheapest. Again, watch that video, it talks about that. You need to know about the various hive components and the various beekeeping tools. You'll need to know how to use the hive tools, the J-hook or the traditional hive tool. You'll need to know how to assemble frames and hive components, and whether you're going to use glue or not glues. Again, I've got videos on all that. You'll need to know how to install foundation inside of a frame, whether you're using plastic foundation or you're using natural beeswax foundation. Again, I've got a video on that. Talks about how to select a frame, how to select your different foundations. You need to identify how to spot and identify the various parts of the brood, the eggs, the larvae, the pupae, the cap cells. You'll need to learn to know what a healthy brood pattern looks like, what a disease-ridden pattern looks like, a shotgun brood pattern. You'll need to know how to identify what the queen and the worker and the drone look like by sight. I know that I've thrown a lot at you. I'm not sure how long this video is going on. I know it's lengthy, but these are all generally accepted basic beekeeping skills that you will need to know whether you are going through the Master Beekeeping Program or not. Even if you're not going through that, you'll still need to know these skills. So I appreciate you sticking with me. For those of you who have stayed with me this long, I appreciate you staying with me, and I appreciate you watching my videos, and I hope you've learned something, and have a great day. Thank you so much.